Okay, thank you. So this provocative title, Implausible, when biology does not explain all life dynamics, comes from comes from an article, but actually comes from several approaches to homeopathy. When homeopathic mechanism of action is called implausible, because the mechanisms are not consistent with well-known physical laws. And we see a recent paper published in 2023 where the authors just dig into this topic, and they call homeopathy a null field of research, because homeopathy preparations that do not contain any active ingredient, and the claim mechanisms are not consistent with well-known physical laws. And the paper they refer to in the references about claiming this is a paper that puts all the foundation of these claims on classical physics and chemistry principles. Actually, starting from the 1960s, Herbert Froelich was a theoretical physicist, and a group of other physicists did a lot of research about bridging biology and physics. And Hans-Peter Dürr was has been the director of the Max Planck Institute for several years. And in one of his articles, he writes that from the point of view of the physicist, it is at first glance difficult to understand why modern biologists do not make more use of the revolutionary ideas of modern physics, sensing that the processes of life seem predestined for such a change. So let's dig a bit into this topic. And for example, Giuliano Preparata was an Italian theoretical physicist, and he wrote an article in 2000, just briefly before his death, and the role of quantum dynamics in medicine. Briefly, what he said, what he wrote, is that the experimental evidence that we have from biology that everything is based on local electrostatic interactions, short-range electrostatic interactions, that all the biological interactions are placed into the model of key and the key lock, and the dynamics in the cells and the organisms that are totally random, diffusive dynamics. So there's experimental evidence that is totally contrary to these fundamental points of molecular biology. So if you take this principle as the basis for life, you don't explain how living organisms can be alive. And going into a typical example, this Professor Pettini is a theoretical physicist, and he analyzes the functioning of the brain from the point of view of the metabolism. And first of all, the introduction is that there are mental functions like intuition, creativity that are impossible to reproduce using however complicated, however powerful computer programs may be. So there are some functions that we display that cannot be explained on the principle of a computer, like mind-brain equals software hardware of a computer. This is not tenable. And if we analyze the metabolic on the point of view of the metabolism of the brain, the human body requires as a whole 100 watts of metabolic power, and the brain uses about 25 watts of that power. And for the storing and processing the information, it uses about 4 watts of power. If we compare the activity of a supercomputer that has a computing power of 10 to the power of the 16th operation per second and consumes around 10 megawatts, and the human brain performs 10 to the power to the 18th operation per second. So the human brain should consume 1,000 megawatt, that is equivalent to the power of a nuclear power plant. So this completely, it doesn't work that way, because we see that our brain consumes only 4 watt. So the body metabolic power doesn't explain what the brain can do. So the only way of explaining how the brain can perform all that amount of operations, consuming such a little amount of energy, only 4 watt instead of 4 megawatt, is considering some quantum effects in the brain, like the wave function collapse. The physicists that wrote this paper, The Memory of Water, Storage of Information and Spontaneous Growth of Knowledge, they claim that the only complex system capable of spontaneously function in a highly correlated manner with such little energy expenditure are coherent quantum systems. So to say that if we accept that the calculations are correct, we should postulate that the brain functions with some coherent quantum effects. And actually, there's, in the last decade, several articles have been published in scientific literature that acknowledge and experimentally validated the observations of quantum effects in living organisms. The most well-known are the photosynthesis and some enzymatic processes and the functioning of smell and the bird orientation. And there are some articles, one very interesting, the future of quantum biology, and some years before, another article was the dawn of quantum biology. So we are already in the future of quantum biology. And also myself and a colleague of mine, we have summarized several of these experimental evidences in this paper, The Quantum Nature of Biological Intelligence, that can be found for free in the internet, in the journal Water. So actually, according to the experimental evidence that we should expand the concept, the framework of biology, conventional biology, including some quantum phenomena that are entanglement, tunneling, superposition, wave function collapse, coherence, and very interestingly and very little known is the phenomenon of symmetry breaking. Symmetry breaking, I placed on the right of the screen, I placed 2 images. One is the image of a drop of water, and the other is a snowflake. Well, if is counterintuitive, we think that the snowflake is more symmetric. Actually, in this field of symmetry breaking, the drop of water is more symmetric, because if you turn it every side, it turns the same. So when a symmetry breaking happens in a drop of water, you get a snowflake that has less symmetry than the drop of water. That's very simple, describing what symmetry breaking is in a very simple image. If we take this experimental evidence, when we go for the interpretation of living organisms, living systems, we cannot use the analogy of a typewriter working on only on mechanical principles, so only atoms and molecules, mechanical forces, electrostatic forces. We cannot use only that principle. Of course, there are these forces in action when we measure blood pressure, or we measure the force of a muscle and many other things. and all the chemical reactions and so on, but we cannot use only that framework. Is not enough. And also we cannot use only the conceptual framework of a system or the brain, like a motherboard, a supercomputer, and all the dynamics, biodynamics, like networks and chaos actors and so on, because all those are based on classical physics. So they are not enough. It's not that they are wrong. They are, of course, we use them every day in our scientific research, in the way we look at life, but they are not. So let's go back to the difficult topic that is about symmetry breaking and boson condensation. There are some articles written by physicists already in the 1980s and describing what is a symmetry breakdown and a boson condensation in biology. And also this concept has been taken more recently, for example, for describing what happens in cancer. So it's not just a physicist topic, it's a topic that can be translated and transferred in biology. And so to make it very simple, we can say that life is governed by symmetry breaking phenomena that they allow to process, store, and share quantum information. And we can say that quantum information in living systems is made of Nambu-Gaussian bosons that we can see in the next slides are generated by symmetry breaking phenomena. We can see it better. So when a symmetry breaking happens, and very simply, we have placed there the drop of water and the snowflake. So the red arrow means a symmetry breaking has happened. So in spontaneous symmetry breaking, the dynamics are not of the systems are not changed, and the perturbation can be very weak and act only as a trigger for this symmetry breaking. So what is important generating the symmetry breaking is not the intensity of the perturbation, rather the phase. The phase, when you take two waves, you can say that two waves are in phase when they have a certain period. So when you have a stimulus that is in phase with the system, so the stimulus can perturbate the system itself. And there's a theorem in physics, that the Nambu-Gaussian theorem, that when a spontaneous symmetry breaking occurs, scalar quasi-particles with no mass emerge. And these quasi-particles, so what happens here, let's go back here. We have a drop of water, symmetry breaking happens, and we have a snowflake. So there's, and you can see how well ordered and organized is a snowflake. So every tiny information that organizes the molecules of water to display that peculiar shape of flake, all those are driven by Nambu-Gaussian bosons that give information and organize matter. Another example, for example, of Nambu-Gaussian bosons is phonons in crystals. How a crystal crystallizes, and the way the molecular atoms dispose themselves in the crystal, all that is called and organized by Nambu-Gaussian bosons. So Nambu-Gaussian bosons are the information that gives shape to matter. And if we go a bit farther in the living systems, we can state the Nambu-Gaussian bosons condensation. So the accumulation of symmetry breaking, every event that we experience creates in the system a symmetry breaking, a change in the system. And every event that happens, every change in the system generates information. So, for example, if there's a strong noise that happens now, so there's an information from the environment, and in myself, there's a symmetry breaking of my system that is triggered, and it generates these Nambu-Gaussian bosons. It generates information. My system is informed of the noise that happened outside. So, and of course, in my inner process, mental process, this information is translated into inner images, emotions, and so on. And these emotions, of course, are transformed then in matter and energy. For example, if I hear a strong noise, then I get an emotion, and then soon after a reaction starts. And so this is what happens. All this circle of events is that I summarized here very simply. So from the environment that we experience as matter and energy, then it comes. So if symmetry breaking occurs, it generates information. This information goes to my conscience or subconscious. Anyway, in any level it goes, it receives an interpretation. This interpretation generates images in myself. All this that is inside these lines, the dot lines, are is the mechanism of Nambu-Gaussian bosons. And inside my body, these images encounter the dynamics in the cells, and according to the Higgs field principle, they acquire mass. So at the very end, what happened outside is transforming to information inside myself. It transforms in emotions, images, and at the very end, I end up with mass, matter, and energy. So again, I have a reaction that can be an acute reaction, a chronic reaction. And this is the mechanism, for example, that can explain very easily what happens in the field that we call psychosomatic medicine. That is a very broad field of research and of clinical activity also. Going very practical, when we look at the embryogenesis, we can see there this symmetry breaking phenomena. We start from an ovocyte, and then that is symmetric, is like a drop of water. Then the fecundation, it is the start of the symmetry breaking, it's the first symmetry breaking, and it generates information. And that information going on and on with these cellular divisions is a symmetry breaking division, and the information goes on and on to the different stages of the embryo. And so not only the material and the energetic status of the embryo, but also the information inside all these experiences is transferred to the mature living being. And there's a lot of, there's quite a lot of scientific papers written on this field, and particularly focusing on the activity of the brain, going back to the activity of the brain, no more on the metabolic side point of view, but on the information and meaning, what the brain does. And so we can read all these sentences. The central proposal of the Ricciardi-Umezawa model is that the input arriving at the brain from the environment, let's say the noise, for example, in which it is embedded, it produces spontaneous symmetry breaking and the subsequent dynamic generation of long-range correlations. So when the stimulus comes in, it generates Nambu-Gaussian bosons, and they interact with the system with long-range correlation. The process of condensation of Nambu-Gaussian bosons in the ground state of the brain is identified with the recording of the memory associated with that specific input perceived by the brain. Memory recovery is described as a process of excitation of the Ng bosons out of the ground state stimulated by an input similar to the one that gave rise to the memory imprint. For example, when listening to one of the previous presentation talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, we can think that stress in childhood is stored, is memorized, and there can be different storing processes of different experiences in childhood, and then during the lifetime, when some triggers, some stimuli from the environment are in phase, are similar to what the child has experienced, they can be triggered and come out. Of course, according to the stimulus, it can be an healing stimulus or a stimulus that strikes the development of an acute disease based on a chronic suffering. So I think that this model explains a lot of what we usually talk about in medicine, psychiatry, and so on. Again, I try to draw a bit of a summary about this. Just follow the brown stimulus on the top, in the center, stimulus. And then the arrow, the brown arrow. So there's a symmetry breaking, spontaneous symmetry breaking, SSB. So this symmetry breaking, the stimulus generates symmetry breaking and generates Nambu-Gosson bosons. And we have the information printing into the brain. And every information, every experience is coded. And so just follow the brown rectangle on the bottom. And so that experience is coded as a memory in our brain, in our organism. When from outside, follow on the left, the brown rectangle is an external stimulus that is similar or very similar to what has been stored maybe also years before. So this external stimulus excites what is memorized because it's similar, as a vibrational similarity. And so we get this recalling process of what has been stored of past experiences. And this is, all this is written in the article, Dissipation and Memory Capacity in the Quantum Brain Model. And all the mental associations can be very easily explained with this mechanism. So we have a memory storage of different experiences, but let's say that a part of different experiences is similar. Just look at the green rectangle on both the rectangles in the memory storage. So there's an external stimulus that have a strong similarity with one rectangle, the blue and green, but there's also a similarity with the green rectangle on the red other. And so there's a excitement of the memory. And so you recall the very similar memory, but also you recall what is associated by a small part of the memory. And that is what is called the conscious feeling that has been excited by an external stimulus. So I've gone very, and I hope I have been too difficult explaining these things, but I can go back in case there are questions. But so when we go back to the problem of plausibility, from the point of view of the external plausibility, and people from outside the homeopathic community challenge homeopathy, saying it's not plausible, I can say that we should start from reconsidering biology as a whole and reconsidering that biology needs to be implemented with quantum phenomena. Then we go back to our homeopathic internal evidence, and we can say two parties. According to what is the accumulated experimental evidence, and we have in the last 10 years a lot of experimental evidence, there are two parties. The one that is more founded on classical biology, that is still trying to explain homeopathy according to a material action, the key and the keyhole mechanism of the classical biology molecules. And another party, I would say, that is supporting the hypothesis of the dynamic action, where quantum phenomena are at work. And actually, in my opinion, there's much more experimental evidence supporting the dynamic action because of the pH variations, changes in the relaxation time of the magnetic resonance, specific structures when you in the lyophilization of the homeopathic preparation, presence of structure, electrophotonic signal, and also the fact that if you administer through olfaction the homeopathic preparation, you still have an effect. And actually, olfaction has already been described as a quantum phenomenon. And there's no exchange of matter when you just smell the remedy. And still, we can demonstrate there's a reaction in the system. So we have already good experimental evidence that, first of all, homeopathic preparations do contain something. What they contain, that something they contain is not just material, but is a structured material, is an informed material. So the different hypotheses that are raised by the physicists in the past, according to which homeopathic preparation could work using some quantum phenomena, are not contradicted. These hypotheses are not contradicted by the experimental evidence. We are not already at the point to say that, okay, we already know exactly what the homeopathic mechanism of action is, but there are some good clues that do not contradict the theory. So thank you for your attention. I hope I said something that could be understood. Thank you.